12,800 years ago, the Earth was warming up. The last ice age was ending, glaciers were retreating, everything was returning to normal. Then, in a single geological instant, temperatures in some regions dropped by as much as 20 degrees. The ice came back, and it stayed for more than 1,000 years. We call this the Younger Dryas. Scientists took the name from a flower, a small white Arctic flower that reappeared in Europe's pollen records when the cold returned. Dryas octopetala doesn't grow in warm climates. When it shows up again in the fossil record, it means one thing: winter came back. But there's something about the standard explanation that bothers me. We know when it happened, but we still can't agree on why. And the deeper I go into the data, the stranger it gets. So let's look at what science actually says. There are currently 4 main theories on the table. Each one has strong points. Each one has things it can't explain. Let's go through all of them together and see which one makes the most sense to you. After this video, you decide which one you believe. If you're ready, let's get into the theories. Theory 1. The meltwater catastrophe. North America's massive Laurentide ice sheet began to melt. That melt created an enormous inland body of water known as Lake Agassiz. At some point, the lake burst open. Trillions of tons of fresh water flooded into the North Atlantic in a single event. Fresh water sits on top of salt water. It doesn't mix. The thermohaline circulation system, the ocean conveyor belt that carries warm water from the tropics to the north, shut down. Europe froze. North America froze. Monsoons shifted. The entire climate system lurched sideways. This is the most widely accepted explanation in mainstream science. It fits well with climate models. But there's a problem with this theory. Exactly where that massive volume of water went is still not clear in the geological record. Let's sit with that for a moment. Theory 2. Volcanic winter. Some researchers argue that major volcanic eruptions from this period sent enough ash and sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere to block sunlight and cause rapid cooling. We know that large eruptions have dramatically affected climate in the past. The Lacher Sea eruption in the Eifel region was long considered the strongest candidate for this theory. However, updated dating from 2025 confirmed that this eruption occurred approximately 150 years before the start of the Younger Dryas. In other words, the volcano had already finished its work long before the Younger Dryas began. It couldn't have triggered it. And explaining the full 1,000-year duration of the Younger Dryas through volcanism alone is difficult regardless. Theory 3. Low solar activity. Some scientists argue that the Sun entered a period of minimum activity during this time. We know that similar periods in the past have coincided with significant cooling events, but solar activity alone has a hard time explaining an onset this sudden and this deep. Theory 4. Cosmic impact. The YDB hypothesis. In 2007, a team of researchers published a paper. They had found a thin, dark band in the geological record, appearing simultaneously across North America, Europe, and the Middle East. All of it dated to the same moment, 12,800 years ago. Inside that layer, nanodiamonds, microscopic diamonds that only form under enormous pressure and heat, the kind that comes from a cosmic impact. Also, anomalous platinum concentrations, the same signature left behind by meteorites. Also, melted glass spherules, shocked quartz, carbon particles consistent with continent-scale wildfires. This is called the Younger Dryas boundary impact hypothesis. There are critics, of course. Some say the platinum anomalies could have a volcanic origin. That's possible. But the same layer, same content, same date, in locations with no volcanic activity, across more than 50 geoarchaeological sites spread across 4 continents. The debate continues. Any one of these 4 theories could be correct. 2 of them could be true at the same time. But one thing is certain. something happened 12,800 years ago, and the world was never the same again. But here we need to stop, because the idea that platinum proves a cosmic impact has recently run into a serious question mark. Data published in 2026 took a closer look at the platinum anomaly in Greenland ice cores and found this: the platinum appears 45 years after the cooling begins, and it continues for 14 years. An instantaneous impact doesn't leave that kind of signature. An instantaneous impact leaves an instantaneous trace. This pattern looks much more like sustained fissure eruptions originating from Iceland, so platinum is still on the table, but it no longer has just one explanation. And where does that leave us? Does the cosmic impact theory collapse? No. But one leg of the evidence is shakier than we thought. What do you think caused the Younger Dryas? Leave your answers in the poll below. I'm curious to see where you land. Whatever caused it, the consequences were immediate, and they were catastrophic. When the Younger Dryas began, the mammoth population collapsed, not just in one region, globally. Animals that had survived for hundreds of thousands of years vanished within a few millennia. The woolly mammoth, the mastodon, the giant ground sloth, the American horse, the American camel, the giant beaver, the short-faced bear, the American lion, 35 genera of large mammals in North America alone. The mainstream explanation, a combination of overhunting and climate change. That sounds reasonable, but it has a serious problem. Humans had lived alongside these animals for tens of thousands of years. Why now? Why 35 genera at once? Why at a global scale? The YDB theory offers a different mechanism. The cosmic event triggered continent-scale wildfires. It destroyed their habitats within a matter of years. Then the impact winter set in, lasting 1,000 years. The animals couldn't adapt to that double blow. And what about humans? The most sophisticated pre-Columbian culture in North America, the Clovis people, disappeared at exactly this moment. Their distinctive stone tools, found across the continent, simply stop. The record goes dark. When humans reappear in the archaeological record, they're using different tools, a different culture, a different approach. Mainstream theory calls this cultural adaptation. But why would a culture this sophisticated change this completely and this fast? Now we're going somewhere that is essentially no different from a crime scene. This is a place that doesn't get nearly enough attention. Abu Hureyra is a 12,000-year-old settlement in Syria, one of the oldest known permanent human communities we've found. In the 1970s, before it was submerged by the Tapka Dam, archaeologists excavated the site. When researchers later analyzed the remains, they found 4 separate findings that reinforce each other. First, melted glass particles. A normal fire produces a few hundred degrees. The formation of these glass particles requires temperatures above 2,200 degrees Celsius. The only known natural event capable of producing that kind of temperature, a cosmic airburst. Second, bone trauma. Human bones from the layer corresponding to the beginning of the Younger Dryas show signs of exposure to sudden, intense heat. Not a hearth fire, not a cooking fire, something that came from outside all at once in a single event. Third, alignment with the YDB layer. The findings at Abu Hureyra match the thin dark band found from Chile to Norway in both timing and chemistry. Fourth, irreversibility. The site is now under the Tapka Dam, inaccessible. It cannot be re-examined. We had one chance at Abu Hureyra in the 70s, and we used it without knowing what we were looking for. That thought never leaves me. What else might have been down there, now buried under that water forever? And then, in 2018, something turned up that seemed to answer everything, until it didn't. A research team excitedly announced something they had found hiding in plain sight. Under the Greenland ice sheet, 3 kilometers down, they had discovered an enormous structure, 31 kilometers wide, one of the largest impact craters on Earth. Its name, the Hiawatha crater. The structure beneath the ice looked geologically fresh. The scientific world was stunned. Everyone asked the same question. Was this the impact that triggered the Younger Dryas? Then 2022 arrived. Argon dating was performed. The result, approximately 58 million years old, corresponding to the final period of the dinosaurs. Far, far older than the Younger Dryas. No connection whatsoever. The door closed. But this is exactly where science gets interesting. Because closing that door opened a new question. If this massive crater wasn't the cause of the Younger Dryas, then what left behind the nanodiamonds, the platinum anomalies, and the melted glass spherules found in the same layer across more than 50 excavation sites? This is where the real theory comes in. Perhaps there was no single massive impact, leaving one obvious crater. Instead, a comet already fragmenting as it entered the atmosphere caused dozens of massive airbursts, scattered across 4 continents simultaneously. That's why there's no single obvious crater. That's why the evidence is everywhere. That's why the layer runs from Chile all the way to Syria. And that village at Abu Hureyra caught one of the pieces passing overhead. And this wasn't an isolated case. In February 2026, one of the strongest papers supporting the cosmic impact hypothesis was retracted. A paper signed by researchers including Kenneth and Moore, claiming to have found shocked-quartz in the YDB layer. Shocked-quartz matters because it only forms in 2 ways: nuclear explosion or cosmic impact. If shocked quartz was genuinely present in the YDB layer, this debate could have been closed. But the editorial review found 3 serious problems. First, selective sampling. The authors were found to have excluded existing samples that didn't fit their model. Second, age model errors. Some samples were determined to belong to centuries before or after the Younger Dryas boundary. Third, sedimentation rate. The observed peaks appear to result from changes in deposition rates rather than a real event. The paper was retracted. Science corrected itself. That's a good thing, but this question has to be asked. If the evidence is this strong, why are there this many methodological problems? And if the evidence is this weak, what explains that layer across so many countries? Right at this point, a new door seemed to open for the impact theory. In 2025, Moore and his team published marine sediment core data from Baffin Bay, not from land excavations, from the ocean floor. And what did they find? Nanoparticles containing iridium, nickel, and cobalt in high concentrations, dated to the same time as the YDB layer. This matters because most of the objections raised against land-based excavations, sedimentation rates, sampling problems, contamination, are much harder to apply to ocean floor cores. The ocean floor is a more stable environment. The risk of contamination is far lower. But unfortunately, this paper was also officially retracted by PLOS ONE on the 11th of February 2026. And the reason was tragicomic. The samples described in the paper as comet dust turned out to be foraminifera, a common type of marine plankton. And it didn't stop there. It was documented that the authors had used artificial intelligence to format their references, and that the AI had generated more than 43 fabricated or incorrect citations. And the doors that had opened for the impact theory slammed shut one after another that day. The debate continues. Now, in the middle of all this chaos, something remarkable was happening on the other side of the world. While the Younger Dryas was still ongoing, someone in southeastern Turkey began to build. Read that sentence again. While the Younger Dryas was still underway, while the climate was in chaos, while the megafauna were disappearing, Göbekli Tepe is dated to approximately 12,000 years ago, right in the middle of the Younger Dryas. 16-ton pillars, animals carved in relief, structures aligned with celestial events. The people believed to have built this were hunter-gatherers. No agriculture, no written language, no permanent settlements. And yet they built this. Not a crude early attempt. Sophisticated, deliberate, the work of people who knew exactly what they were doing. And then they buried it, stone by stone, deliberately. Nothing ends up this deep underground by accident. But I want to stop here. Because what bothers me most about Gobekli Tepe isn't the pillars, it's the state of the excavations. Gobekli Tepe was discovered in 1995. Klaus Schmidt began excavating here, and estimates suggest this. Only 5% of the site has been excavated. 5%. The remaining 95% is still underground. Klaus Schmidt died of a heart attack in 2014. After that, excavations slowed down. In some sections they stopped entirely. Why? The official explanation: budget constraints, staffing issues, administrative matters. Maybe. But why is the world's most important archaeological site, with 95% still underground, being excavated this slowly? Some researchers suggest that deeper layers may contain structures far older than 12,000 years. If that's true, the history books need to be rewritten. If that's true, something existed before the Younger Dryas. What if? What do you think is the reason Gobekli Tepe was buried? Leave your answers in the poll. I want to know what you think. And Gobekli Tepe wasn't the only response to what was happening above ground. 600 kilometers to the west, someone took a very different approach. They didn't build up, they went down. In 1963, a man in Cappadocia was renovating his home. He broke through a wall in his basement. Behind it was a cave, then another cave, then corridors, then floors. 18 floors, 85 meters below the surface, large enough to shelter 20,000 people, along with their animals and food supplies. The name of this place, Derinkuyu. Rolling stone doors that could only be locked from the inside, each floor sealed off independently. Ventilation shafts reaching deep underground, fresh water wells. This was not a cave. This was a system deliberately engineered to keep thousands of people alive when the surface became uninhabitable. The official dating is contested. Turkey's Department of Culture attributes it to the Phrygians around 2,800 years ago, but some researchers point to a much earlier date. The same era as Gobekli Tepe, right in the middle of the Younger Dryas. The argument goes like this: cosmic air bursts on the surface, continent-scale wildfires, 1,000-year freeze setting in. The surface becomes uninhabitable, and 20,000 people go underground. Under this theory, Derinkuyu wasn't a city. It was a vessel, Noah's Ark, carved from rock and soil. And Derinkuyu wasn't alone. Cappadocia contains nearly 100 underground complexes discovered so far. The city of Kaymakli is connected to Derinkuyu by a tunnel 8 kilometers long. The city of Matyat, believed to be 3 times larger than Derinkuyu, hasn't been fully excavated. We still don't know how large this network actually is. Gobekli Tepe was built on the surface and buried. Derinkuyu was carved into the earth. Both in the same region, both from approximately the same era. Both appear to have been deliberately concealed. One was hidden under the ground above. The other was cut into the ground below. Were the same people responsible for both? And what exactly made the surface so uninhabitable that someone felt the need to go 85 meters down? And Gobekli Tepe isn't the only place where this pattern shows up. There's a pattern I've been thinking about for years. The world's most important archaeological sites are either barely being excavated, have had their digs halted, or have had their findings withheld for decades. Yonaguni, Japan. Off the southern tip of Japan, under the Pacific, lie massive stone structures, stepped platforms, carved surfaces, estimated to have sunk around 8,000 years ago. Man-made or natural? The debate continues. But no comprehensive underwater excavation has ever been conducted. Gobero, Niger, a lakeside settlement in the middle of the Sahara, dated to 10,000 years ago. Hundreds of skeletons, bodies buried with flowers, Discovered, documented, and largely left alone, the Bimini Road, Bahamas. A long structure of regular stone blocks floating underwater in the Atlantic. Debated for decades. No comprehensive investigation. Saying all this is not the same as claiming someone is deliberately hiding something. But it's enough to ask. Why so slow? Why so little funding? Why do some findings take decades to be published? Some discoveries would completely overturn our current understanding of history. And overturning our understanding of history means rewriting a great many things. How many people actually want that rewrite? What do you think explains the slowness of archaeological excavations? Drop your answer in the poll below. Science can only take us so far. But there's another layer to this story, one that's been sitting in plain sight for thousands of years. There's something archaeology can't tell us, but mythology might. There are flood and fire stories all across the world. You've almost certainly heard them at some point. Stories and epics known to everyone. Noah, Gilgamesh, but the list goes much further than that. Each of these deserves its own video, and I'll be making them in the coming months. But let me quickly remind you of a few now. In Hindu tradition, Manu was warned by a fish that the world was about to be destroyed. He built a vessel. He survived. This story was written a full 1,000 years before Gilgamesh. The Hopi tradition speaks of previous worlds destroyed by ice and water. We are living in the fourth world. Aztec cosmology describes previous suns, each destroyed by catastrophe. We are in the fifth sun, the Norse Fimbulwinter, 3 consecutive winters with no summer between them, precedes the destruction of the world in their cosmology. 3 winters, no summer. It is said this is exactly what an impact winter looks like. In China, the Great Flood of Ganyu, waters that lasted for centuries. And then there's Plato, writing about events 9,000 years before his own time. 11,600 years before today, the end of the Younger Dryas. He said he received the story from Egyptian priests, who said they received it from records going back even further. Was Atlantis real? Probably not in the Hollywood sense. But is Plato encoding the cultural memory of a real catastrophe? Australian Aboriginal oral traditions contain descriptions of sea level rise events that researchers have now matched to geological records going back 7,000 years. 7,000 years. Passed down verbally. Still accurate. If oral traditions can preserve memory across 7,000 years, why couldn't they do the same across 12,000? Let's all ask ourselves that. If you want to see this in a broader context, in our first video, we looked at why the universe seems to behave like a processing constraint. When you bring that together with the Younger Dryas, the picture that emerges goes somewhere very interesting. The link is right here. The Younger Dryas ended, and what came next raises as many questions as the event itself. 11,700 years ago. And in the silence that followed, something happened. Agriculture began in Mesopotamia, in China, in Mesoamerica, in the highlands of New Guinea. 4 separate locations, 4 separate crops, all independent of one another, all within a few thousand years. For 200,000 years, we were hunter-gatherers. Then suddenly, in multiple places at once, we started farming the land. The mainstream explanation, the climate stabilized, conditions became favorable. That's reasonable, but it doesn't answer why at the same time. Why in 4 places with no contact with one another? And Gobekli Tepe was already underground. Someone built it during the Younger Dryas, buried it before it ended, and walked away as agriculture and a new civilization began. Walked away? Or are they still continuing somewhere? I know that sounds strange, but I can't move past this question. 95% of Gobekli Tepe is still underground. And right next to it, there are other buried excavation sites. Karahan Tepe, Sayburç, Sefer Tepe, all built in the same style, all with excavations that have also been halted. No comprehensive underwater investigation at Yonaguni. Thousands of sites under the Sahara and at the bottom of the Atlantic that we haven't even begun to explore. What if something is there? What if it's being deliberately kept from us? Do you believe an advanced civilization existed before the Younger Dryas? I'd genuinely love to know where you stand. Leave your answer in the poll below. So let's put it all on the table, everything we've covered, and ask what it adds up to. So what do we actually have? A global climate catastrophe with 4 different explanations, none of them fully closed, the same chemical signature across more than 50 sites, the fingerprint of a cosmic event, a platinum anomaly initially presented as proof of a cosmic impact, but re-examined in 2026, with its explanation still contested. 35 genera of large mammals disappearing simultaneously, along with the most sophisticated pre-Columbian culture on the continent, bones showing extreme heat exposure, and the evidence of that settlement now underwater, unreachable. A Greenland crater that initially seemed promising and was then dated to 58 million years ago, leaving behind the question, then where is the real impact signature? A 12,000-year-old sophisticated structure built during the Younger Dryas, buried before it ended, with 95% still underground. And 600 kilometers away, an 18-floor underground city built to shelter 20,000 people from the same era, with doors that could only be locked from the inside. Agriculture beginning simultaneously in 4 separate locations, 12 or more cultures, independent of each other, different continents, all telling the same story. And Plato quietly recording a catastrophe dated to the end of the Younger Dryas. All of this could be unconnected. Or it could all be the same event, remembered in different languages, carved into different stones, buried under different soils, told to different children across different centuries. Science hasn't reached a verdict yet. Mythology is not proof. But when the data and the stories start pointing at the same window of time, that deserves our attention. Before we wrap up, I want to say something directly, not as a narrator, but as someone who has been sitting with this material for a long time. I want to be honest with you here, as an archaeologist. But as a geophysicist, I at least know what I'm looking at when I examine geological data. I've been reading these sources for years, looking at the tablets, tracking the findings. And the thing that strikes me most is this. The oldest written sources we have, the Sumerian tablets, the Egyptian texts, the Vedic writings, all speak of a reset, of a previous era, of knowledge being given anew. The history of religion speaks of the Great Flood, of the end of a known humanity. Ancient religions, ancient mythologies, they all speak of the same catastrophic flood. We taught you, they say. That could be coincidence. It could be cultural universality. It could be the way humans naturally tell stories. But I think we have to ask, what if these stories aren't random? What if something really did happen 12,000 years ago, and we've been trying to tell the story ever since? And what if certain forces are deliberately keeping that truth from us? I believe finding the right question matters more than finding the right answer. And that's exactly what this channel is here to do. And if you're still here at this point, that tells me something about you. If you're asking these questions too, you've come to the right place. I publish a new video every week, sometimes science, sometimes the tablet. Sometimes both are pointing at the same place at the same time. In those moments, I think you'll want to be here. Subscribe to the channel. The time we spend here will be worth it, because the tablets have a great deal to say. You just have to read them carefully.